In this video, I'm going to be putting together one of the best looking gaming PCs you can build right now, featuring the brand new NZXT H7 Elite, an RTX 3080 Suprim, and a white NZXT Z690 motherboard. This build is not to be messed with. Perfect for playing the latest AAA titles at 1440p and 4K at high frame rates, and doing a bit of video editing, rendering, you name it, this PC's got it covered. In this video, I'll be walking you through in detail all the component choices, showing you how to put the build together as we go along and testing out the performance later. Plus, with a couple of epic montages along the way, you're sure to be entertained. Let's do this. Let's start off with a bit of background that will lead us into our CPU and motherboard installation first of all. When I first saw the H7 Elite in white, I just knew we had to put together an incredible white themed gaming PC build. But gathering around white components can be quite tricky, so we've taken plenty of time to gather up the best. And one of the latest that fits really well with this system is this, the NZXT N7 Z690. NZXT have been in the motherboard game for actually quite a while now. They've done AMD B550 designs, Intel Z590, and now Intel Z690. They've seen pretty good reviews as well, been fairly good for overclocking, and include a unique design aesthetic that shrouds much of the motherboard. Something we see in higher end designs from other manufacturers, the NZXT bring to the market at a better choice. This is evidently the best motherboard aesthetically for our NZXT H7 Elite, and as we'll test out later, should also perform well in the performance department, which is, to be fair, arguably a bit more important. Taking a look at some of the actual important performance features though, and I've been fairly impressed. On the side here, you've obviously got your BIOS controls, Wi-Fi 6E, you've got 10 gigabit USB-C, you've got 10 gigabit USB-A, 20 gigabit USB-C, and a nice I/O that seems to tick really every box. On the front, we've got the famous NZXT shrouding with a few nice features, including a USB-C front panel header, PCIe Gen 5, and support for cheaper DDR4 memory. Heading down to the bottom of the board here, you've also got physical power and reset buttons on the board itself, which is perfect for actually going ahead and debugging your system in case of an error. And you've also got some NZXT RGB headers for controlling within NZXT cam, ticking lots of boxes for the build today. Into the motherboard, I'll be installing the processor for this build, Intel's Core i7 12700K. Now, depending on the use case for this build, the i5, which is good for gaming, or the i9, best for video editing and rendering, are also good options. But the i7 is a decent middle ground that provides a good value proposition and still provides fantastic Intel 12th gen performance levels. We're going to go ahead and pull up the retention arm on the socket and unfold the socket itself. Be super careful with these new gen Intel sockets as they're actually quite delicate, talking from experience. Push the cover down and the black plastic normally pops off, maybe not on this motherboard. There we go, give it a bit of pressure with the arm, take that out of the way and fasten it into place. And your CPU isn't going to be going anywhere anytime soon. Now next up on our hit list of components is the RAM. This is a 32GB kit of Corsair's Vengeance RGB Pro. It's 3600 MHz in speed and of course comes with the white aesthetic that's going to look great in this build. We're going to install these into the second and fourth DIMM slots, only needing to unclip the top side as the bottom aren't clips, which is a nice feature, and we're going to slide the RAM in. Apply some pressure to both sides and repeat this for as many DIMMs as you've got. Make sure to go for at least 2 DIMMs for dual channel performance and leave upgrade room for 4 DIMMs later, allowing us to add in another 32GB identical kit for 64 gigs of RAM a little bit later on. Now normally at this stage, if you've got an air cooler, you'll install your CPU's air cooler now, but because we've not, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the NVMe drive first of all. When I picked this drive out, I thought it was going to be a solid option, but looking at the motherboard, I'm not sure whether or not we're actually going to have the clearance for it to fit. So let's take the cover off. Interesting. Now, the reason I say that is because on previous gen NZXT motherboards, there was just a cover and nothing underneath. That seems to have changed this time around, as by the looks of things, they're actually installing a heatsink underneath, allowing, of course, for your SSD to receive some active cooling. Important for Gen 4 drives. Let me see if I can take this off, install the SSD and pop the cover back on, or whether it's too tight, and we need to go for a heatsink-less drive. So, we've come to the conclusion that the white thing won't fit back on, but we also think there's enough white on the rest of the build that missing just this little bit of white shrouding will be okay. If not, we will change this out later. So that's the SSD in. That's the motherboard basically finished with for the time being. We're going to move it into the case next up before looking at the cooler or any of the other components. The H7 Elite takes all of NZXT's H7 design and pushes them up a notch. With glass on the front, mesh on the top and glass on the side, it's a completely white case. None of this white with a bit of black accent in. It's going to allow us to create a truly one-of-a-kind build today with a really nice theme that we've just not really been able to achieve before. The only case I can think of that competes with this is Corsair's 4000D White QL edition, which I'll link in the description below on Corsair's web store. But you can find a full list of comparisons between that case and this case in our full H7 Elite review over on the website. Now, as with any case, even new ones, we're going to strip it apart first and make everything a bit easier to access. Unusually, this is quite easy. The top panel just clips off, and the same goes for the side panel, essentially giving you a completely toolless design. Unclip that, a little something like so, and that's pretty much it. The only thing to be conscious of is that these can pop off fairly easily if you've not done very good cable management. Slight con of this design, but overall, I like no screws. It does make things quite a bit easier. One thing I'm not so keen on though, is that when we do our peel, the caution tempered glass sticker stays on. Why? I'm now going to have to go ahead and try and scrub the glass clean and get rid of the sticky residue. Just put it on the film panel. Much easier that way round. Static electricity everywhere today. Now what we're going to do is we're going to lay the case down flat on our desk for the next stage. And quite handily, the included accessory box popped out. This includes all the screws and all the mounting hardware we need to install basically the whole build and put everything together. Once we're here, we can then much more easily install the motherboard. Now, for a standard ATX board, you're going to have 9 standoffs. 3 at the top, 3 in the middle, and 3 along the bottom. And you can see that with our NZXT N7 motherboard. Some of the screws are hidden by shrouding, which we'll have to take off, but they're still there. And you can see that from the bottom side. A quick glance at the case reveals 3 at the top, 3 along the middle, and 3 down the bottom. Very easy to spot today because, of course, the standoffs are black and the case is completely white. The built-in I/O shield also makes life easy, and we can just go ahead, slide the board in, and screw it into place. Remember, 3 screws at the top, 3 along the middle, and 3 down the bottom. The center post is raised, holding the motherboard in place for this stage. Lovely stuff. Once the motherboard's in, we can then move on to the cooler, which from the box looks to be black, which totally doesn't fit with what we're doing here, but it's actually white, or at least that's what I'm told. It's also completely box fresh, which makes a change. I love having brand new stuff here in the office. It's really enjoyable to actually go ahead and build with. Here we go, let's move the behemoth of a PC out the way and take a look at our brand new white cooler. Oh, yes, and more yes. Oh my. Look at the fans. They also light up, which is going to look sick later. Oh, I am so here for this. Big reveal. Oh, isn't that beautiful? It looks amazing. It's super powder coated, white tubes as well. People, if you're making white all-in-ones, you've got to have white tubes. Now, you might be thinking, James, that's a black water block. No, it's not. It's a screen. So we can set that to white as well later on if we wish. Oh, I am a happy chappy now. I might seem overly excited by a white CPU cooler. This has been stuck in customs for 2 weeks. We had to pay import charges. It's been shipped from all over the world, but it is here and we can finally go ahead and install it. Oh yes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to install the radiator and the fans at the top of the case, and then we'll finish things off with the water block. Just fans on the one side is going to be fine, exhausting air through the radiator. We'll wire up all the RGB and all that good stuff a little bit later. To pop the water block on, we're going to take this flexible backplate here and we're going to pop it through the rear of the motherboard, and that will then fasten into the water block. You can see all the holes line up and are in the right places. These thumb screws down here will then actually keep everything secure, while these male-to-male posts, the ones with equal screw length on each side rather than the ones with a stubby end, are going to go through the back plate. That's then hopefully going to look awesome with our all-white aesthetic, which should only get better as we go through the build. Remember, backplate first, male to male post second, then pop the cooler on top and finish things off with our thumb screws, which can also be tightened up with a Phillips head screwdriver to make sure your cooler is not going to go anywhere. We'll deal with all the cables and wiring just a little bit later. With the cooler in and looking pretty sick, we can next move over to the GPU, where I've gone ahead and picked up another accessory to try and level this build up a little bit, to try and make it look that little bit better. Now don't let the boring, unassuming brown box fool you. Oh no, this is something quite special. Oh yes! This right here is NZXT's version of a vertical GPU mount. Now, to install this, we've got to take out all the existing PCI lanes and slot this in instead. But one thing I love about it, and I mean love, is actually 3 slots, making triple slot cards like the Suprim X 3090 Ti genuinely fit. And I'm talking about true triple slot cards with 3 PCI lane covers. Now, this is also in white, which matches perfectly. This color scheme in this build is so good. And we can install the GPU into that in just a moment. Now, the GPU is an MSI, so I was going to say NZXT. They don't make GPUs yet. Maybe one day. What we say in NZXT? Now, this here is the MSI Suprim X 3080, the newest 12 gig variant. But to be honest, the 12 gig or the 10 gig version of the 3080 will work well. One question you're probably wondering, James, should you wait for next gen RTX graphics cards? Maybe. The 3080 is probably the first one that's going to get replaced on the basis that the 3080 was the first of the 3000 series to launch, so something to keep in mind. But the 3070 Ti and 80 Ti are also great fits for this build. I think this is just a better value sweet spot. Plus, when new cards do eventually come, these will fall in price, especially on the new and the used markets, making your life nice and easy. Go ahead and unscrew all of your PCI lanes on the NZXT H7 Elite. Keep these safe in your box in case you ever want to add in multiple cards or take out this riser. And that's pretty much it. Add the GPU in, clip the riser into place, and make sure you connect up the PCI cable to your PCI Gen 5 slot on the top of the motherboard. The riser is Gen 4 2, allowing for the latest bandwidth on the latest graphics cards, something that's great to see. NZXT are on form right now, and long may it continue. This is looking so sick. We were talking in the office about how this looks like a computer generated image. It's so clean, and it's about to get even cleaner because look what we've got up our sleeves. I'm so happy with this build. Now we are of course going to be installing the power supply in a few moments, but first take a look at these. Now I know what you're thinking, James, they must have been like $100, no, $50, no, £25 or $30 is what I paid for these. They're from a company called Easy Fab DIY or something like that. Easy DIY Fab, and I'll link them below. They come with the cable combs. They're white on the connections. They look amazing. You get 2 GPU power cables, 1 for your motherboard and 1 for your CPU. So I've also got a spare white one we're going to use for our second 8-pin CPU, or is it only 4 on this motherboard? Not sure how we're going to do that yet. Let's go ahead and put the motherboard one in first though, and then I'll report back with my results. The motherboard cable's in. That's looking very cool. We're just not quite sure how to do the GPU one yet. We're going to try and figure this out. I think it's going to have to run to sort of this side of the cover. We can't put it up from underneath as the hole is here. It's in the wrong place. Not going to work. And our vertical GPU mount undoubtedly make things a bit more tricky. So I'll rejoin you in a second once we've actually gone ahead and got it in. I mean, yeah. There's not really any other words than just, yes, this thing looks incredible. To round things off, we're going to go ahead and install the power supply. I'm not going to run you guys through every little detail of this. You probably know it by now. And then we'll jump into an awesome montage followed by some detailed benchmarks later on. Let's do this.
I have the advantage.
Nicely done. I think this system might just be one of the best looking PCs I've ever put together. But does the performance line up with the stunning aesthetics? There's only one way to actually find out. We'll be diving into detailed gaming benchmarks for a range of titles, and you can see a summary of all of our testing on your screen now. We'll be taking a closer look at select titles though, starting off with the brand new COD Vanguard and moving through to Warzone, Fortnite, Apex and more. In COD Vanguard at 4K high settings with DLSS enabled, we picked up more than 160 frames per second on average. An incredible set of frame rates for one of the latest AAA titles at 4K. The story didn't get worse either with Forza Horizon 5, our next title. Here we achieved just shy of 100 frames per second when tested at 4K ultra settings, with 98 frames per second on average to be precise. Games like Apex Legends also perform well when tested at 4K. Here we got over 100 FPS, 132 to be specific, very close to where Apex caps out, and an incredible frame rate for gaming at 4K. Fortnite was a similarly positive story, and this time we mixed things up a bit, testing at 1080p competitive settings. Here we got 250 frames per second. That's so much frame rate that's ready to drive even the best high refresh rate panels. This system swallows up any title you throw at it, regardless of the settings. Something further demonstrated in our next title, COD Warzone. Here at 4K high settings, we this time got 98 frames per second. Is that it? And the game looked incredible. For all of our frame rate data, we used MSI Afterburner's Reaver Tuner and NVIDIA FrameView to ensure fair results. Finally, to wrap things up, we also tested out the latest Battlefield 2042. At 4K high settings with DLSS enabled and set to performance mode, we this time surpassed 100 frames per second on average. Wow. We were really impressed with some of the results we were able to gather here, showing the system not only looks fantastic, but performs admirably too. With that, that wraps it up for this one. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.